Welcome to day 10 of our Kaha Tahi 12 Days of Christmas. Our past does not define us. Today I'll be talking about 5 ways we sometimes allow our past to determine who we are and what our future will be, and how we can change that. First, there's our ancestry, our DNA. Now, it's important to know about your ancestry. It actually can be very beneficial. Studies have shown that children who learn about their ancestors and the challenges they faced and overcame become more resilient because they learn that they too can overcome challenges. And of course, it's very important to know your medical history. This can help in prevention and treatment. The problem lies in when we use that history to decide our fate. For example, if you hear yourself saying something like, well, my mother and most of her sisters died of breast cancer, indicating that you expect that to happen to you, or no one in my family ever went to college, and think that means that you can't either, then you're allowing that ancestry, that DNA, to make decisions for you. And that's never helpful. I had the privilege of teaching high school for 24 years. And I knew several students who were the first in their family to graduate high school. Be the first. Set your goal and decide you're going to do it, even if you are the first one in your family to do so. Do you ever allow your mistakes to define you? Sometimes it's hard after you've put a lot of time and effort into a project, a business, a relationship, and when it doesn't turn out the way you wanted, you feel like you failed. But the reality is, it's the project, the business, or the relationship that failed. A mistake is never a failure unless you didn't learn anything from it. I like the saying, some days you win, some days you learn. Learning is growing. There's nothing to be ashamed of or regret about learning. Don't fear your mistakes. Learn from them. If you're hurting because of some mistakes you've made in the past, take some time today to journal about it. Write about what happened. Write about your feelings. And then take time to write about what you learned and what you're doing differently now because of what you've learned. Sometimes when we look back on our lives, we'll find that the times when we experience the most pain, the most mistakes, were also the times when we experienced the most growth. Learn from mistakes. Don't fear them. And sometimes habits. We let habits define us. Maybe you somehow got into the habit of waiting till the last minute to finish a project. And so now you consider you're just a hopeless procrastinator. Or maybe you got into the habit of yelling at your children or always being late. And now you've slapped some negative label on yourself and define it and allow it to define who you are. Separate yourself, your being, from your habits. Habits can be broken. Heidi talked about habits on day 3, and she gave some very helpful tips that I hope you're already implementing. Choose some habits now that you'd like to break. What action steps can you take to break them? Who can you get to help you? take the time to replace those self-defeating habits with something more positive that's going to help you become the person you want to become. Have you ever had that experience when someone asks you, why do you always do this? And your immediate thought is, that's just the way I was born. That's who I am. That's my personality. Well, we each have a unique personality, but is it completely unchangeable? Personality is like habits. We can change them. I cringe whenever I hear someone describing someone else saying, oh, this is the way they are. They will never change. What a cruel thing to do. To slap on this label as a life sentence. I firmly believe in the Ebenezer Scrooge principle. Remember our hero of Charles Dickens' creation in A Christmas Carol. Just like Ebenezer Scrooge, we can decide we want to change. We can decide to become more kind, more patient, more loving. It may not be the dramatic overnight experience. We may be more effective at making gradual changes, but we can make our personality whatever we want it to be. Personalities can be changed just like habits. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Resources, over 2/3 of children report a traumatic event by age 16. And the events they list under as traumatic is potentially traumatic are psychological, physical, or sexual abuse, community or school violence, national disasters or terrorism, commercial sexual exploitation, sudden or violent loss of a loved one, refugee or war experiences, a military family-related stressor such as deployment, parental loss or injury, physical or sexual assault, neglect, or serious accidents or life-threatening illness. And many of our population have experienced not one of these events, but many. Maybe you're one of them. I was physically, sexually, and emotionally abused from the time I was 7 until I was 15 years old. And when you're treated like an object, you forget that you're a human being. I didn't even feel human. I felt like a non-entity, and I certainly didn't feel worthy. I went into adulthood with self-doubt and self-loathing. There were 2 truths that helped me survive, and 2 lies that kept me quiet. I had parents who loved me, and I never doubted that. They were merely unaware that this abuse was happening in their home. And they taught me the second truth, that God loves me, and I never doubted that. But I was convinced at an early age of 2 lies. One, that I would lose my parents' love if I ever told them about the abuse, and that my abuser was capable of killing me with his bare hands. And so I remained silent. Fortunately, with the help of many good people, I was able to accept those truths and reject the lies. I'm a survivor, not a victim. Our past trauma does not define who we are. We may have not understood all of the facts of what was happening. We may have blamed ourselves. I did. But the truth is, we can, as mature adults, with what we know and understand now, revisit that and help that inner child who was wounded so deeply to understand. I read a quote recently. As traumatized children, we always dream that one day we'll be rescued. We just don't realize it will be ourselves as adults. Whether your past is based, whether it's your ancestry, your DNA, mistakes, habits, personality, or childhood trauma, you do not have to let it define who you are. Make choices today of the kind of life you want. Take action on those steps that will lead you to that life. This is Emmylou Penrod, and I hope you have a wonderful day.